Flames devoured the east wing of the Hwang estate as smoke choked the midnight air, the crackling of burning timber mixing with the desperate shouts of security guards below. Through the inferno, 1-year-old Hwang Do-Kyung fought his way up the grand staircase, his tailored Armani suit singed and torn, his chiseled face streaked with soot and blood. He had one objective: reach his son's bedroom before the ceiling collapsed. But when he burst through the door and grabbed 10-year-old Ju-won, ready to carry him to safety, the boy did something that would shatter everything. Do-Kyung thought he knew about survival, about love, about what truly mattered. "No!" Ju-won screamed, twisting violently in his father's arms, his small hands pushing against Do-Kyung's chest. "Father, you have to save Miss Gabrielle first. She's trapped." Do-Kyung's blood ran cold. Every instinct screamed at him to secure his heir, to protect the future of his bloodline. The boy was light in his arms. He could make it to safety in seconds. "Ju-won, we have to go now," Do-Kyung commanded, his voice carrying the authority that made grown men obey without question. But his son looked up at him with eyes full of tears and devastating clarity. "If you don't save her, you'll lose me anyway," Ju-won said, his voice breaking. "She's my family too. Please, father. I can't lose her like I lost Mom." The words hit Do-Kyung like a physical blow. Behind them, the servant's wing blazed a death trap. Going back was suicide. But in his son's tear-filled eyes, he saw a test being written, a choice between protocol and promise, between survival instinct and the heart of a child who had already lost too much. The room fell into a crystallized moment of impossible choice. The most feared man in New York's criminal underworld stood frozen, his son in his arms, facing a decision that would define everything. Hello, family. Welcome to Love and Shattered Bonds Stories. If you believe family comes first, no matter the cost, hit that subscribe button right now. And if you think true love is worth fighting for, smash the like. Show us you know what really matters. Now, let's get into the story. 8 months earlier, Gabrielle Simmons had walked through the imposing iron gates of the Hwang estate in upstate New York with nothing but a hastily packed suitcase and the kind of desperate hope that comes from having nowhere else to run. The sprawling compound, more fortress than home, sat on 12 acres of pristine land, surrounded by high walls, topped with security cameras and guards who moved with military precision. It should have terrified her. Instead, after 3 years of living in fear, having locked doors between her and the world felt like the first real breath she'd taken in forever. The interview had been conducted by Mrs. Park, the head housekeeper, a woman in her 50s with steel-grey hair pulled into a severe bun and eyes that missed absolutely nothing. She had studied Gabrielle's bruised wrist. The makeup didn't quite cover the finger marks, and something in her expression had shifted from suspicious to understanding. "Mr. Hwang values discretion above all else," Mrs. Park had said, her Korean accent precise. "You will see things here that exist in no police report, no newspaper, no conversation outside these walls. Can you live with that?" Gabrielle had thought about the alternative, returning to Atlanta, to Henry's apartment, to his escalating rage and her shrinking world. "Yes, ma'am. I can live with that." "Good." Mrs. Park had handed her a key card. "The salary is 3 times the market rate, because the work is not just cleaning and cooking. Mr. Hwang's son has been through trauma. The boy needs stability, routine, kindness." She paused, her expression hardening. "But you will not speak to him unless spoken to first. You will not ask personal questions. You will not attempt to be his friend or his substitute mother. Are we clear?" The rules had seemed reasonable then. Simple, even. Gabrielle had no intention of getting involved in anyone's family drama. She needed sanctuary, money to disappear properly, and time to figure out her next move. That was all. She hadn't counted on Ju-won. The first time she saw him, he was standing in the library, a small figure in expensive clothes that hung on his too thin frame, staring out the window at nothing. His dark hair fell across his forehead, and even from across the room, Gabrielle could see the shadows under his eyes, the kind that don't come from missing one night's sleep, but from months of carrying weight no 10-year-old should bear. He had turned when she entered, and for just a moment, their eyes met. His were dark, guarded, ancient, in a way that made Gabrielle's heart crack. She recognized that look. She'd seen it in her own mirror, often enough. The look of someone who'd learned too young that the world could hurt you. Then he'd looked away, dismissing her presence as thoroughly as if she'd never existed. And she hadn't counted on Do-Kyung either. The first time she saw Hwang Do-Kyung was at 2 a.m. on her third night, when she'd ventured into the kitchen for water and found the most dangerous man in New York's criminal underworld standing at the sink, blood dripping from a gash on his forearm, his white dress shirt torn and stained dark across the ribs. He'd looked up, and Gabrielle had frozen. She'd seen photos during her background research, every news article, every society page mention of the reclusive Hwang Do-Kyung, the Korean businessman with the Midas touch and the impeccable reputation. But photos didn't capture presence. They didn't capture the way he seemed to fill a room just by standing still, or the intelligence that burned behind those dark eyes, or the barely leashed danger that radiated from him like heat from a fire. He was younger than she'd expected, 31, maybe 32, with sharp, handsome features that belonged on magazine covers rather than in criminal files. His dark hair was disheveled, his jaw shadowed with stubble, and there was something raw about him in that moment, something vulnerable that the polished businessman veneer usually concealed. "You're the new maid," he said, his voice low and rough. Not a question, a statement. "Yes, sir." Gabrielle Simmons. His eyes swept over her, assessing, calculating, seeing far too much. "You're afraid of me." Gabrielle lifted her chin, refusing to cower, even though her heart was hammering. "No, sir, I'm not." A ghost of something surprise? Amusement? Flickered across his face. "You should be." "Maybe," she said quietly, "but I've lived with real fear, the kind that comes home drunk and angry, the kind that apologizes with flowers and does it again the next week." She met his eyes steadily. "You're dangerous, Mr. Hwang, but you're not that kind of dangerous." For a long moment he stared at her, and Gabrielle wondered if she'd just made a fatal mistake. Then he turned back to the sink, dismissing her as completely as his son had earlier. "There's a first aid kit in the pantry," she said, moving toward it before he could order her away. "That cut needs stitches, but butterfly bandages will hold it if you're not planning to do anything strenuous for the next few hours. And if I am, then it'll reopen. You'll bleed all over your expensive suits, and Mrs. Park will be very annoyed with me for not preventing it." This time, she definitely saw the corner of his mouth twitch. "We can't have that." She cleaned and bandaged the wound in silence, acutely aware of the warmth of his skin under her fingers, the way he watched her with those dark, unreadable eyes. When she finished, she stepped back. "Thank you," he said, and something in his tone made it clear the gratitude extended beyond the medical attention. He was thanking her for not asking questions, for not flinching, for understanding the unspoken rules of his world. "You're welcome, Mr. Hwang." As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. "Miss Simmons." "Yes?" "My son doesn't talk much anymore. Not since his mother died." There was something careful in his voice, something vulnerable he was trying to hide. "Mrs. Park told you the rules about him. Follow them." "I will." "Good." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer. "But if he does talk to you, be kind." It wasn't a command. It was a plea. And in that moment, Gabrielle saw past the mafia boss, past the intimidating businessman, past the blood and the danger, and glimpsed the broken father underneath. "I will," she promised. And somehow, without realizing it, Gabrielle Simmons had just taken the first step toward changing 3 lives forever. The first week passed in a blur of routines and careful distance. Gabrielle learned the rhythms of the Hwang household, the morning silence when Do-Kyung left for business meetings, the afternoon tutoring sessions for Ju-won with stern Mr. Kim, the evening meals that the boy ate alone in the vast dining room while his father worked behind closed doors. She watched Ju-won from the periphery, following Mrs. Park's rules to the letter. The boy was unfailingly polite when their paths crossed, bowing slightly and murmuring, "Good morning, Miss Simmons," or "Thank you," when she set his lunch on the table, but his eyes never quite met hers. They were always focused somewhere past her shoulder, as if looking directly at people required more energy than he could spare. He moved through the estate like a ghost, silent, careful, taking up as little space as possible. Sometimes Gabrielle would turn a corner and find him standing in a hallway, staring at a family portrait of a beautiful Korean woman with warm eyes and a gentle smile. His mother. And in those moments, the loneliness radiating from him was so profound it made Gabrielle's chest ache. She understood that loneliness. She'd worn it like a second skin for 3 years, trapped in Henry's apartment, cut off from friends and family, shrinking smaller and smaller until she almost disappeared. But at least she'd had the agency to leave, to run, to choose sanctuary. Ju-won was 10 years old. He hadn't chosen any of this. Not his mother's death, not his father's transformation into ice, not the fortress of a home that protected him from external threats while trapping him with internal ones. At night, lying in her small room in the servants' wing, Gabrielle would hear it, the sound that made her heart break a little more each time. Soft, muffled crying from somewhere in the main house. A child weeping in the darkness, trying so hard to be quiet that the silence itself became a scream. She wanted to go to him. Every maternal instinct, she had instincts she didn't even know existed, urged her to find that lonely boy and tell him it was okay to cry, okay to need comfort, okay to be a child who was hurting. But Mrs. Park's words echoed, "You will not attempt to be his substitute mother." So Gabrielle stayed in her room, clutching her pillow, listening to Ju-won's muffled sobs and wondering how long either of them could survive in this beautiful, terrible sanctuary. Gabrielle's first formal encounter with Hwang Do-Kyung came on her 5th morning, when she accidentally walked into his office while delivering fresh linens to the adjacent guest suite. He sat behind a massive mahogany desk, perfectly composed in a charcoal 3-piece suit, reviewing documents with the focused intensity of a predator tracking prey. When she entered, his head snapped up, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Hwang," Gabrielle stammered, backing toward the door. "I didn't realize. Mrs. Park should have explained the protocols." His voice was cold, precise, carrying an edge that made her freeze. "This wing is off limits during business hours. Jin-ho will review the security boundaries with you." Jin-ho turned out to be Do-Kyung's second in command, a broad-shouldered man in his 40s with watchful eyes and a loaded holster visible beneath his jacket. He walked Gabrielle through the household hierarchy with military efficiency. 12 security personnel rotating in 8-hour shifts, 3 domestic staff including herself, and an elaborate system of zones she could and couldn't access. "Mr. Hwang values predictability," Jin-ho explained. "Stay in your designated areas. Don't ask questions about his business. And never, under any circumstances, interrupt a meeting." Over the following weeks, Gabrielle observed Do-Kyung from careful distances. She saw how men in expensive suits entered his office with confident strides and emerged, subdued, occasionally pale. She noticed the way even Jin-ho stood straighter when Do-Kyung entered a room, the respect, or was it fear, that rippled through every interaction. But what struck her most was the distance between father and son. One evening, Ju-won approached his father in the study, a drawing clutched in his small hands. "Father, I made this for you in art class." Do-Kyung glanced up briefly. "Very nice. Leave it on the table." No smile, no embrace. Just a dismissal so complete that Ju-won's shoulders slumped as he carefully set the drawing down and retreated, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous hallway. That night, cleaning the kitchen, Gabrielle overheard the staff talking. "It's been 2 years since Mrs. Hwang's assassination," Mrs. Park murmured to Jin-ho. "The boss hasn't been the same since. Neither has the boy." "She was his heart," Jin-ho replied quietly. "When she died, he buried it with her. Thought it would protect the kid, keeping distance, showing no weakness. But look at them now, 2 ghosts living in the same house." Gabrielle understood then. This wasn't just a household. It was a mausoleum where the living mourned in separate rooms, too afraid of their grief to share it. Gabrielle found Ju-won in the garden on a Tuesday afternoon, curled beneath the cherry blossom tree with his face buried in his knees, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She should have walked away. Mrs. Park's rules were clear, but the sound of a child crying alone shattered something in her. "Ju-won?" she said softly, kneeling beside him. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" He looked up, tears streaming down his face, and for the first time in 3 weeks, really saw her. It's the day Mama died, 2 years ago." Gabrielle's heart broke. "Oh, honey, Father said I shouldn't be sad anymore, that it's been long enough." His voice cracked. "But I still miss her. Does that make me weak?" "No." Gabrielle pulled him into her arms. "Protocol be damned. Missing someone you love doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." "You really think so?" "I know so. I lost my father when I was 12. Some days I still cry about it, and that's okay. Ju-won stared at her. You do? Of course. Want to know what helped me? When he nodded, she smiled, creating little memorials, picking flowers, saying what I missed about him. Would you like to do that for your mama? They gathered white roses and baby's breath, arranging them beneath the tree. Ju-won really talked for the first time, sharing memories of his mother's bedtime stories, her laugh, the way she made kimchi jjigae. She would have liked you, Miss Gabrielle, he said softly. I wish I could have known her. What is the meaning of this? Gabrielle's blood froze. Do-Kyung stood at the garden entrance, his expression thunderous. Father, Ju-won began. Inside, now. Do-Kyung's voice was ice. Miss Simmons, my office, immediately. 30 minutes later, Gabrielle stood before his desk, prepared for termination. You violated direct orders, Do-Kyung said, his tone lethal. Yes, sir. He was crying and I couldn't. He's been eating again. The words stopped her cold. Do-Kyung's expression flickered, something raw and vulnerable breaking through. For 3 weeks. He's actually eaten his meals. The nightmares have decreased. Mrs. Park reported he's been lighter. Gabrielle held her breath. You may continue interacting with my son, Do-Kyung said carefully, but you will report to me directly about his well-being. You will not make decisions about his care without consulting me. Understood? Yes, sir. He turned toward the window, and his next words were barely audible. Thank you for making him smile again. 6 weeks after the garden incident, the Hwang household had transformed in subtle but unmistakable ways. Laughter echoed through hallways that had been silent for 2 years. Ju-won's drawings covered the refrigerator, and for the first time since his wife's death, Do-Kyung found himself drawn to spaces where his son existed. It started with dinner. Do-Kyung would appear in the dining room, ostensibly to review documents, but his eyes would track Gabrielle and Ju-won's interactions. The way she made airplane sounds with his fork, how she turned math homework into games, the genuine delight on his son's face when she praised his reading. Then came the evening reports. Ju-won finished his history project, Gabrielle told Do-Kyung one night in his study. He wrote about his mother's family in Seoul. He asked if you'd read it. Do-Kyung's jaw tightened. I will. But the conversations began drifting. He'd ask about her day. She'd mention a book she was reading. He'd recommend another. Soon they were discussing philosophy, music, the careful dance of revealing pieces of themselves without exposing too much. Why did you really come here? Do-Kyung asked one evening, his dark eyes studying her. I told you. The salary. The truth? Gabrielle. She met his gaze steadily. I was running. From someone who hurt me. I needed somewhere he'd never find me. Something dangerous flashed in Do-Kyung's eyes. He won't. Not here. The air between them shifted, charged, electric. When he handed her Ju-won's schoolwork, their fingers brushed. The touch lasted a heartbeat too long. Neither pulled away. This is dangerous, she whispered. I know, but neither moved. The next morning, Jin-ho cornered her in the kitchen. Whatever's happening between you and the boss, stop it. Gabrielle's face heated. Nothing's happening. Don't lie to me. I've known him 15 years. I see how he looks at you. Jin-ho's expression was grave. You think you're safe here, but his interest makes you a target. Every rival, every enemy, will see you as his weakness, and they'll use you to destroy him. I would never. It won't matter what you intend. In our world, caring about someone is a death sentence for both of you. That night, an encrypted message arrived on Do-Kyung's phone. Jin-ho delivered it with unusual tension. Park Min-seo's organization is probing our territory. They're testing our defenses, looking for vulnerabilities. Do-Kyung's expression hardened. Double the perimeter security. And Jin-ho? He glanced toward where Gabrielle was reading to Ju-won in the next room. Put a protection detail on her. Discreetly. Boss. That's an order. Jin-ho nodded grimly. The war was coming, and everyone knew exactly what the enemy would target first. The mistake was innocent, a photo Mrs. Park posted on her private social media of the estate's gardens. Gabrielle was barely visible in the background, but it was enough. 3 days later, Henry found her. Gabrielle! His voice cut through the afternoon air as she returned from the market with supplies. He stood outside the estate gates, his familiar frame somehow more menacing in this context. Baby, I've been looking everywhere for you. Her blood turned to ice. How did you? Doesn't matter. He moved closer, and she saw the familiar signs, the tight jaw, the controlled movements that preceded explosion. "You're coming home, now." "No." Her voice shook but held firm. "I'm not going anywhere with you." His hand shot out, gripping her wrist with bruising force. "Don't make this difficult. You embarrassed me, running off like some—" "Let her go." Do-Kyung's voice was death itself. He stood 20 feet away, Jin-ho and 2 guards flanking him. But it was Do-Kyung's expression that made Henry's grip loosen, cold, lethal calculation that promised violence. "This is between me and my girlfriend," Henry said, but his bravado wavered. "She's not your anything." Do-Kyung closed the distance with predatory grace. "You have 3 seconds to remove your hand before I remove it permanently." Henry released Gabrielle, puffing his chest. "You threatening me?" "I'll call the cops." Do-Kyung moved so fast Gabrielle barely tracked it. One moment Henry was standing. The next he was on his knees, Do-Kyung's hand locked around his throat, face pressed into the gravel. "You will never contact her again," Do-Kyung said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "You will never speak her name. You will forget she exists. Because if you don't—" He leaned closer, and whatever he whispered made Henry's face drain of color. "Do we have an understanding?" "Yes." Do-Kyung released him. Henry scrambled to his car and fled, tires screeching. "Father." Ju-won stood in the doorway, eyes wide. He rushed to Gabrielle. "Are you leaving? Now that bad people know you're here?" Gabrielle looked at Do-Kyung, uncertain. "She's staying," Do-Kyung said firmly, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "No one will hurt her here. I promise you that." Later, after Ju-won was in bed, Do-Kyung found Gabrielle on the terrace. "Thank you," she said softly, "for what you did. I should apologize for the violence you witnessed." "Don't." She turned to face him. "I wasn't afraid. Of you, I mean. For the first time in years, I felt safe." Something shifted in his expression, walls crumbling, revealing raw emotion beneath. "I can't let anyone hurt you," he said, his voice rough. "Not anymore." The words hung between them, heavy with implications neither was ready to name. 2 months passed like a dream. The Hwang estate transformed from mausoleum to home, filled with Ju-won's laughter, the smell of Gabrielle's cooking, and something neither adult dared name aloud. Saturday mornings became sacred. Do-Kyung taught Ju-won traditional taekwondo in the garden, movements flowing like water. The first time he invited Gabrielle to watch, she saw a different man, patient, encouraging, his hand gentle on his son's shoulder as he corrected his stance. "You're a natural teacher," she told him afterward. "My father taught me the same way." A rare, soft smile. Before everything changed, they began sharing their worlds. Gabrielle cooked soul food, collard greens, cornbread, her grandmother's mac and cheese, while Do-Kyung introduced them to Korean traditions. He taught Ju-won calligraphy while explaining the meaning behind each character. Gabrielle learned to make kimchi, her hands working beside Do-Kyung's, their proximity electric. It was perfect, too perfect. "Miss Gabrielle?" Ju-won asked one evening, his voice small. They were reading together, his head resting against her shoulder. "Will you stay forever? Will you be my new mother?" The book slipped from Gabrielle's hands. "Ju-won, sweetheart, I know you're not Mama, but you make Father smile again, and you make me feel safe." His eyes, so much like Do-Kyung's, looked up at her with desperate hope. "So will you stay?" The words caught in her throat. How could she promise forever when she didn't know if she belonged in this world? "I care about you so much, Ju-won, but that's a complicated question." His face crumpled. "That means no. That means I don't know." Her heart shattered at his devastated expression. Do-Kyung stood in the doorway, and the pain in his eyes mirrored his son's. That night, he found her on the terrace. The tension that had built for months hummed between them like a live wire. "He loves you," Do-Kyung said quietly. "I love him too. Both of you." The confession escaped before she could stop it. Do-Kyung stepped closer, his hand rising to cup her face. "Gabrielle." His phone shattered the moment. Jin-ho's voice was urgent. "Boss, we've got confirmed intel. Park Min-sao is planning something big. Multiple sources, coordinated strike." Do-Kyung's expression hardened instantly. "When?" "Unknown. But soon." He ended the call, his eyes finding Gabrielle's. Whatever had almost happened between them hung, suspended, achingly close, yet impossibly distant. "I need to increase security," he said. "Jin-ho will brief you on new protocols." As he walked away, Gabrielle touched her face where his hand had been and wondered if they'd ever get another chance. The explosion came at 2:47 a.m. Do-Kyung was in his command center, reviewing security footage, when the first detonation rocked the estate's east wall. Alarms shrieked. Screens lit up with breach points 3, no, 4 simultaneous entry zones. "Park Min-seo," Jin-ho confirmed. "Weapon drawn. Coordinated assault. Get to Juwon," Do-Kyung commanded, already moving. "I'll take the west approach." But the second explosion changed everything. The servants' wing erupted in flames, accelerant-fed fire that consumed wood and plaster like paper. Gabrielle. Do-Kyung's blood turned cold, but he forced the thought down. Protocol was absolute. Secure the heir first. He fought through smoke and gunfire, eliminating 2 attackers on the staircase, his movements mechanical, efficient, deadly. Juwon's door splintered under his shoulder. The boy stood at the window, tears streaming down his soot-stained face. "Father!" Juwon launched himself forward, and Do-Kyung caught him, already turning toward escape. Then Juwon went rigid, pushing against his chest. "No, father, no, you have to save Miss Gabrielle first. We're leaving. Now." Do-Kyung's voice carried absolute authority. "She's trapped." Juwon's scream was raw, primal. "She's still in there. Trapped. Father, please save Miss Gabrielle." Every tactical instinct screamed at Do-Kyung to secure his son. The boy weighed nothing. 30 seconds to safety. Then he could attempt rescue. That was protocol. That was smart. But Juwon looked up with eyes that held something worse than fear judgment. "If you don't save her, you'll lose me anyway." His voice broke. "She's my family too. If she dies." A sob choked off his words. "I can't lose her like I lost Mom. Please, father, please." The world crystallized into impossible choice. Behind them, the servants' wing was an inferno. Going back was suicide. But in his son's face, Do-Kyung saw the test written plainly. "Choose who you really are." "Jin-ho," Do-Kyung's voice cut through chaos. "Take Juwon to the safe point, now." "Boss, that's an order." He thrust Juwon into Jin-ho's arms, ignoring his son's protests. Then he turned and ran into the fire. The servants' wing was hell. Flames consumed everything, smoke so thick he couldn't see 3 feet ahead. "Gabrielle!" he roared. A weak cough answered from the collapsed section. She lay pinned under a burning beam, her uniform charred, face gray with smoke inhalation. "Stay with me," Do-Kyung commanded, lifting the beam with strength born of desperation. He scooped her into his arms as the ceiling groaned ominously. The structure collapsed behind them as he burst through the final doorway. Jin-ho had vehicles waiting, medical teams, Juwon sobbing in relief. Hours later, in the hospital's private wing, Do-Kyung sat between 2 beds. Juwon, sedated for trauma. Gabrielle, critical, 2nd-degree burns, severe smoke damage, but alive. He took her hand, his voice raw. "I chose you. I'll always choose you. Both of you." The private medical facility became their world for 3 weeks. Gabrielle drifted in and out of consciousness, her body fighting infection and healing burns that scarred her arms and shoulder. Juwon refused to leave, sleeping in a cot beside her bed, holding her uninjured hand like a lifeline. And Do-Kyung kept vigil over them both. "You should rest," Gabrielle whispered on day 12, her voice still rough from smoke damage. "I can't." He looked hollowed out, haunted. "Every time I close my eyes, I see you trapped under that beam. I see Juwon's face, when he thought he'd lost you. But you saved me." "Barely." His hand trembled as it covered hers. "Gabrielle, I almost lost you both. I can't pretend anymore that you're just my son's caregiver. You're," his voice cracked, "you're everything. To both of us." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "Do-Kyung, I love you." The words tumbled out raw, unguarded. "I've been falling in love with you for months, and it terrifies me because loving someone in my world is a death sentence," she finished quietly. "I know. Loving you almost killed me. Your world almost killed me." Pain flashed across his face. "Then I'll change my world." The intensity in his eyes stole her breath. "For both of you, I'll find a way out of this life. I'll build something legitimate, something safe, whatever it takes." "You'd do that. I'd burn down everything I've built, if it meant keeping you and Ju-won safe. But Jin-ho's investigation complicated everything. He entered the room with grim determination, waiting until Ju-won was napping before speaking. Park Min-seo's interrogated associates confirm it, Jin-ho said quietly. The fire was specifically designed to target Gabrielle. They've been watching, gathering intelligence. They knew she was your weakness. Do-kyung's expression turned murderous. Mobilize everyone. I want Park Min-seo's entire organization. Boss think. Jin-ho's voice was urgent. If you go to war over her, you prove them right. Every enemy will know exactly how to hurt you. Then what would you have me do? Do-kyung's rage was palpable. Let them try again? Maybe Miss Gabrielle isn't your weakness. Ju-won's small voice cut through the tension. He sat up, eyes ancient beyond his years. Maybe she's your reason to be strong differently. Mama used to say, the bravest thing father ever did was love openly. Maybe it's time to be brave again. The room fell silent. Do-kyung stared at his son, then at Gabrielle, and something shifted in his expression resolve, replacing rage. You're right, he said finally. Both of you. It's time to choose a different kind of strength. He pulled out his phone, his next words changing everything. Jin-ho, contact my attorney. I want every legitimate exit strategy on my desk by morning. It's time to dismantle the empire. 6 weeks after the fire, they returned to the rebuilt estate. Security had tripled guards at every entrance, surveillance everywhere. But the fortress couldn't protect against the enemy within their ranks. Park Min-seo's mole struck during Gabrielle's first grocery run. 3 SUVs. Professional extraction. She vanished in under 90 seconds. The ransom video arrived an hour later. Gabrielle, bound and bloodied, kneeling before Park Min-seo's cold smile. Your territory, your submission, or she dies, Park's voice promised. You have 12 hours. Do-kyung watched the video 3 times, his expression carved from stone. Then he looked at Ju-won, who stood rigid with terror and determination. We get her back, Ju-won said, his voice steady despite tears. Whatever it takes, father. Whatever it takes, Do-kyung agreed. He mobilized every asset, called in every favor accumulated over 15 years. By midnight, 40 armed men surrounded Park's waterfront stronghold. Do-kyung led the assault personally, a storm of calculated violence, eliminating resistance with surgical precision. He found Park in the main office, gun pressed to Gabrielle's temple. One more step and she dies, Park snarled. Do-kyung raised his weapon, finger on the trigger. This was justice. This was protection. One bullet would end the threat forever. Do-kyung, don't. Gabrielle's voice cut through his rage, weak but clear. Don't become the monster for me. Choose who you want to be. The words froze him. He saw his reflection in the window, weapon raised, face twisted with hatred, and recognized the man his son would see if he pulled that trigger. You're right, Do-kyung said quietly, lowering his weapon. I'm choosing differently. Sirens wailed outside. Park's eyes widened in disbelief as federal agents stormed the building. Do-kyung had called them 20 minutes earlier, providing coordinates and evidence of Park's operations. You destroyed your own empire for her? Park laughed bitterly as agents restrained him. No, Do-kyung said, moving to free Gabrielle. I destroyed yours. Mine ends on my terms. Later, as FBI agents processed the scene, Do-kyung held Gabrielle while Ju-won clung to them both. Jin-ho approached, his expression grim but understanding. The cooperation agreement means full disclosure, he said quietly. Everything we built gone. Good. Do-kyung looked at his family bloodied, traumatized, but alive and together. It was never worth more than this. Agent Morrison handed him paperwork. Your testimony guarantees immunity, but your criminal organization is finished, Mr. Hwang. That's the point, Do-kyung replied, signing without hesitation. As dawn broke over the harbor, Gabrielle whispered against his chest. What happens now? Now. He kissed her forehead, then his son's. Now we build something worth keeping. Together, the empire had fallen, but the family had survived. The townhouse in Brooklyn was modest compared to the Hwang estate. 3 bedrooms, a small garden, neighbors who waved hello. But it was filled with something the fortress never had: warmth. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Gabrielle emerged from the kitchen carrying a lopsided cake, candles blazing. Ju-won, 12 now, taller, with his father's sharp features softening into adolescence, laughed with pure joy. "You made my favorite." He grinned at the chocolate monstrosity decorated with uneven frosting letters. "Ju-won is 12. Do-Kyung wrapped an arm around Gabrielle's waist, pressing a kiss to her temple. His consulting firm had thrived strategic analysis for legitimate corporations, using the tactical mind that once ran a criminal empire for legal purposes now. The transition hadn't been easy, but watching his son blow out candles in a home without armed guards made every sacrifice worth it. "Make a wish," Gabrielle encouraged. Ju-won closed his eyes, then looked at them both. "I wished for this, for us to stay this happy." Earlier that day, they'd visited the memorial garden where Ju-won's mother was buried. Gabrielle had hung back respectfully while father and son laid flowers, but Ju-won had pulled her forward. "I think Mum would like you," he'd said thoughtfully. "You both taught me that love isn't selfish, that it grows bigger when you share it." Now, as evening settled over Brooklyn, Gabrielle found Do-Kyung on their small terrace overlooking the city skyline, so different from the view they'd once had. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly, settling into his arms. "Leaving that life?" Do-Kyung turned to face her, his eyes holding the same intensity that had first captivated her, but without the shadows. "Every time I watch our son smile without fear, every morning I wake up next to you, every dinner we eat, without bodyguards stationed outside, I remember exactly why I chose this." He cupped her face tenderly. "You were worth burning down an empire for. You both were." "I love you," she whispered. "And I love you, both of you." The terrace door opened, and Ju-won bounded out, launching himself between them. "Family hug," he declared, wrapping his arms around them both. As they stood together, former maid, reformed criminal, and the boy whose cry in the flames had saved them, all the city lights twinkled below like promises kept. Sometimes the bravest thing a child can do is show their parents what really matters, and sometimes the most powerful thing a man can do is listen. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. Let me know in the comments. Do you agree with Do-Kyung's decision to completely dismantle his life's work and surrender his empire just for a chance at a normal life? Or do you think there was another way he could have protected Gabrielle? If you enjoyed this story, you're definitely going to love the next one. It's even crazier, more dramatic, and full of twists you won't see coming. So, subscribe now to our channel so you don't miss new updates from us. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us continue creating these powerful stories of love, redemption, and family. Thank you as you do so. Until next time.